What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today, we are going to be doing a 2024 fantasy football mock draft. This is going to be for half PPR 12-team leagues. As you guys are preparing for these home league drafts, I am actually in Vegas today for my home league draft right now. So as you guys are seeing this, I'm on vacation drafting my own fantasy football team. But we do have a guest in today's video. We are going to be drafting with Caleb Niemi. So let's not waste any more time. Let's hop right into today's video and let's start drafting these fantasy football teams. Caleb, how you doing, man?
I'm doing so good. It's so good to be back on the League FFB channel. I'm excited to do this draft, excited to just be here with all you. So let's get this thing rolling.
Look, man, it's been a little while, to be honest, for us being on the same stream. But as you know, we have this draft on the board and Nick wasted no time. He's going Christian McCaffrey 101. Do you think that even though CMC has this little calf injury, he is the unanimous 101?
Unanimous 101. The fact of the matter is, if CMC declines by even 10%, he's still going to be the RB1 best overall player in fantasy football. So yeah, I'm still in on CMC at the 101.
Fair enough. I am too. But look, I'm at the 105. You are at the 108. I'll let us kind of get into why we picked them. I've just been testing out this middle round strategy. I wanted to put it to a test with real people in this mock draft today from our Discord. So that's what I'm doing today. I select Jamar Chase at the 105, but you picked the 108. Why did you want to pick there?
I wanted to pick the 108 because in one of my home leagues, I'm actually drafting for the 108. I haven't been able to do a ton of mock drafts at the 108. So I decided, hey, we're going to put our actions into practice today. And drafting Justin Jefferson at the 108 and him falling is actually crazy that I get to get him in the back end of your fantasy football draft.
Hey, a lot of people are nervous about Sam Darnold. Sounds like you're not that nervous about Sam Darnold under center, are you?
Not at all. Not at all. I think looking at last year, seeing what Justin Jefferson was able to do post Kirk Cousins and that Achilles tear tells me all I need to know about Justin Jefferson. He's a dog. He's the best wide receiver in the NFL. So even if he doesn't have elite level quarterback play, he will be in a good spot in 2024. So all in on Justin Jefferson. Not all in on Sam Darnold, but I think it could be worse.
Look, man, I think the reality of it is Minnesota Vikings fans, which I would like to say I'm fairly in tune with. I do think that most of us considered JJ McCarthy as a second half of the year type of starter. It wasn't like we were waiting on JJ McCarthy to be the week one starter. Now I see we might end up getting an auto here. I told you it was bound to happen. It always does. But with that being said, people were nervous when JJ McCarthy got injured, but I think not much is going to change. You may miss the back half of the year, which does have some upside with McCarthy under center, but I don't think that was going to be the majority of the year anyways. I think they were going to let McCarthy sit and kind of learn. So it was going to be Sam Darnold no matter what. So if you were drafting JJ, as in Justin Jefferson, early in your drafts 3 weeks ago, it probably shouldn't change too much now.
Exactly. And when I'm looking at this board, we have the 112 goes double running back off the jump. Listen, Derrick Henry ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs in a PPR format's interesting. Then Travis Etienne off the board. Heavy running back here. How is your running back strategy kind of changing as we kind of head towards the season?
Look, man, I think in a format like this, a half PPR league, you have those running backs. I think for me, I've tend to find myself wanting to go more of a hero running back, specifically a modified where if I'm picking in the later half of the first round, I'm okay going with a Brees or a Bijan. Now, obviously, they didn't make it to the later in this draft where you got the Justin Jeffersons that were falling. Now, with the second round, there's some guys that I like. I like, Taylor, Gibbs, ETN, Kyron. In fact, those were guys that I wanted to take a shot on, but we're not going to end up getting to take a shot on one of those guys. So I am going to gamble a little bit. I'm going to take Achane. I think, look, man, he's a guy who has some risk to him as well. You have the Kyron Williams, who, although he is still risky, I think he is going to be a player that still has the upside. And it's not as risky as what Achane feels like, because I know that if Kyron Williams is healthy, Kyron Williams is going to be seeing a heavy workload. Achane, it does feel like this is still a committee no matter who is healthy. We just know the upside of what Achane can do. Last year, he had some weeks where he gave his 50-point weeks in fantasy football. So he's a game breaker. He does feel risky, though.
There's definitely a little bit of risk with Devon. I think the biggest thing for me is if he can just get his snap share to go up, which it was abysmally low. I think was it like 38, 42% last year? year, something like that. If all of a sudden that can go 5%, he can get into like the high 40s, not even saying getting to a 50% snap share, because I don't think that's going to happen. I think Devon still ends up being that top 6 RB on a points per game basis. It's just going to be a matter of can he stay healthy, which we need to see. I mean, he's bulked up. He looked pretty good on some of those Instagram photos that he posted, but we'll have to see how it goes in the season.
Yeah, I mean, they were using him outside as well. Like he was lining up as a receiver sometimes. So it was interesting to see that in the preseason. You drafted Puka Nacua. We didn't get to talk too much about that. You want to talk through Puka as I make my selection here?
Yeah, I have Puka as a back end first type player, even in a half PPR format. So the fact that I was able to get him coming all the way back around to me in the second round with all those running backs going off the board, you just got to take best player available and the best value. And so I feel really good about the Justin Jefferson, Puka Nacua start. Now the question is going to be, hey, when do I get this running back? At what point do I jump into that? Because like we said, we've had a bunch of running backs fly off the board here. And so kind of looking at the overall value, I don't know if I'm going to be taking a running back with this next pick, but we'll have to see what kind of falls to me here.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And kind of in the same breath as like the breakout wide receivers of Puka Nacua, we had Nico Collins, who was my selection here. Look, man, when I'm doing this modified hero running back type of build, I want to take in that third round a wide receiver that has some upside in a good offense. Now, guys that I would typically look at in that type of range would be Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Nico Collins, a guy like Jalen Waddle, maybe Cooper Kupp. All of those guys kind of fit the bill for me. Now, Nico Collins, he is my favorite of that bunch because we know how good that Houston Texans offense is going to be. Nico Collins has proven that he is an alpha X type of wide receiver in this offense. I know a lot of people like Tank Dell. Some people like Stefon Diggs. I think at the end of the year, man, it's not going to matter. Nico Collins is the number one here. Now, obviously, there's room for multiple people to be fantasy relevant in this offense, but I think Nico Collins, he feels to me like the safest selection in the Houston Texans offense, and he might have the most upside of all of them as well.
You know me. I love some Nico Collins. So I love that pick for you. And I think especially like in a lot of the drafts I've been in recently, I've been seeing Nico go in the back end of the second. So I think you got some really great value there at the 3-5.
Yeah, and being able to plug him in as your 2, next to a guy like Jamar Chase, it does feel pretty good. Now, you ended up going with Travis Kelce. Talk to me about the tight end pick. You take the first one off the board.
Yeah. So in a lot of drafts that I've been in, Travis Kelce's been going in the back end of the second, early third. So I thought it was exceptional value that I was able to get him in the back end of the third. I think the big thing with Travis Kelce is let's not remember we were all taking him last year in that first round. So whether it was like 106, 107, 108 range, that's kind of where Travis Kelce was going. And so just being able to get him, and even though last year was maybe like slightly a down year, he was still the tight end one. Like I'm still confident. I know he's getting up there in age, but he's playing with Patrick Mahomes. They added better weapons, so now defenses don't necessarily have to just target Travis Kelce. I understand there's a little bit of worry that he's going to be kind of milking it until they get to the playoffs, doing a little bit of, that NBA, just take that rest, and maybe his snap share goes down a little bit. But I still like Travis Kelce, especially when you're able to get him in the third. Because right now, when you're looking at my team, of course, I'm kind of going a little bit of a 0 RB up to this point, but I feel like I've absolutely have great wide receivers, have a great tight end, and so I can kind of fill out the rest of my team from here.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Look, last year, Travis Kelce, we had the Sam Laporta breakout, and Sam Laporta was really, I think, from an overall fantasy points, was the number one on the year, depending on the format you played in. Now, Travis Kelce, from a points per game standpoint, was the number one still. People forget that he missed some games at the beginning of the year. That was like a whole thing. I remember I drafted Travis Kelce in one of my leagues, and he missed the first game or something like that, and people were going crazy about Travis Kelce. Now, the reality is, when he was on the football field, he was still dominant. I totally agree with you. Even if it's not, because the format in this one, not a tight end premium, that just increases the value. Getting him in the third in a non-tight end premium, he's still going to score, similar points to guys like Mike Evans, Nico Collins. Like some of those guys he's going to score just as much as them. And in a tight end premium, forget about it. He's going to be one of the best scoring assets you can still get.
Exactly. And I think a lot of these wide receivers have just started to fall super far. So it is interesting to see how some of these teams are building out their rosters. And I think especially getting one of these elite level tight ends, I feel a lot better about some of the wide receivers that are falling a little bit later on. But I'm on the clock here, and there's some running backs that I like, but I think I'm just going to continue this 0 RB build a little bit. it and go
That
Stefon Diggs.
I would have took him there too. I think he's a value at where that was.
I think Stefon Diggs, in all my drafts that I've been doing, he goes in the third. Like, he honestly goes ahead of Malik Neighbors in a lot of the drafts that I'm in. And so, listen, I think Nico Collins is the clear alpha, but I think the value of getting a guy like Stefon Diggs in the fourth, listen, I'm taking best player available because at the end of the day, injuries happen. I can find running backs on the waiver wire or later in the draft. I feel really great about this start.
Yeah, look, I agree. I think, like I said, Diggs, anybody in that offense has the upside. I think Stefon Diggs is still going to see a ton of targets. People have this negative feeling towards him because of the back half of the year last year where he kind of did disappear. I don't believe all of that was on Stefon Diggs. A lot of that was on the scheme that Joe Brady came in and wanted to establish the run. He never really has featured a number one wide receiver ever in any offense that he's ever been in. So if maybe foreshadowing, if you have Keon Coleman and you think Keon Coleman is going to be this alpha, pump the brakes just a tiny bit is what I would consider. But I like Stefon Diggs there. Now I go Dalton Kincaid. I have been very adamant all offseason about saying that if you can land one of the top 5 tight ends, and these are the first 5 that came off the board here in this draft: Kelce, Laporta, McBride, Kincaid, and Andrews. If you can get one of those, this is not the year to punt the tight end position, because all of the guys that could have broke out last year did, and now they are all being properly valued in drafts. I think these guys all have true, maybe even overall tight end 1 upside within the top 5. But outside of this, I think you kind of get more into that dart throw territory.
So I wanted to ask you, if you had the choice between Trey McBride and Dalton Kincaid, would you have still chosen Dalton Kincaid over Trey McBride, or do you got Trey McBride a spot ahead?
I would have took Trey.
Good to know. I mean, the tight ends fly off the board. And I mean, you wait a few rounds on a guy like Evan Ingram, that's potentially possible, but it's crazy to see Sam Laporta, McBride, Kincaid, Andrews, just all go a few picks apart. So
yeah. I was debating between Andrews and Kincaid. I honestly, in my rankings, I have Andrews ahead of Kincaid by 1 spot. But for this build, I wanted to go with a different direction, go with Kincaid. I have them so close that it doesn't really matter. Now, this round right here in the 5th round, this is typically where I like to land my wide receiver 3, especially when I'm trying to build these hero running back builds. However, I got sniped on T. Higgins. T. Higgins is my favorite pick in this 5th round, and I just didn't get him. So I did end up going with George Pickens. Obviously, at the time of this recording, George Pickens is the number 1 there in Pittsburgh. There is no Brandon Ayuk there. That has been rumored. Is it actually going to happen? I don't know. It's been rumored for weeks and weeks and weeks. I feel like I've said this caveat in 25 videos up to this point. But at the end of the day, George Pickens, if he is the number 1 there in Pittsburgh, he's probably going to get a lot of targets, and I'll take the upside on a guy like that as my wide receiver 3.
Yeah, I like that pick for you. I think George Pickens he's proven that he's an alpha. He just hasn't gotten the target share. He's had terrible quarterback play last year with Kenny Pickett. Add in Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, who I'm not saying that it's going to be mind-blowing better. I think going from like QB 29 to QB 25 will be enough of an efficiency jump for George Pickens to really show. And especially if he can get in that like 115 to 125 target territory, all things are going to be up for George Pickens.
Yeah, and he should. With the departure of Deontay Johnson, that leaves a massive target share that is now available. We expect the majority of those to go to George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth, who Pat Freiermuth has been one of my sleeper tight ends this year that I just have continued to pump up a little bit. The reality is I want to see the touchdowns go up for George Pickens. The touchdowns have not really been there throughout the course of his career so far. He does profile as that big red zone threat. I'd like to see him become their go-to red zone option. That's what I'd like to see out of George Pickens this year.
No, I think that's definitely plausible, and hopefully Justin Fields is a starter. That's my prediction. I think that'll be the best thing for this Pittsburgh Steelers and George Pickens' overall fantasy football value, because we saw what Justin Fields was able to do with DJ Moore last year, and I think very similarly George Pickens can be in that same mold.
Yeah, I mean, Fields, for better or worse, tends to dial into that number 1 receiver, mainly because they are the first read, and Fields may or may not get through his progressions that quickly. So sometimes he is just forcing the football to that number 1 wide receiver. I think that does mean good things for George Pickens, if that is. But keep in mind too, last year, Cortland Sutton, when Russell Wilson was under center, Cortland Sutton was having a very solid season for fantasy football. I think no matter who the quarterback is, it should be fine. Obviously, the big elephant in the room and the real issue would be if they do bring in a guy like Brandon Ayuk. That would really dampen the expectations I have for George Pickens in 2024.
I am right there with you. I have a hard choice here, Andrew. I really do, at the 6-5, because we've gone absolutely 0 RB up to this point. So I could punt the position again and just absolutely throw myself to the wolves, or I could address it right here. here. And so I'm going to address it right here. And right now it's between two guys for me. It's between James Conner and DeAndre Swift. And this is hard. I guess I'm going with James Conner. I hate it for James Conner's value. The fact that I know Trey Benson by at least week 8 is going to be pushing a ton of opportunities just with his draft capital, with his profile and how explosive he is. I know there was all the rumors earlier in July, like, oh, he's going to be the RB3 behind Michael Carter. Like, those things are said and done, but I do like James Conner here, I guess, to start off this very shaky running back core that's going to be, but at least he has a ton of touchdown upside.
Yeah, man. I agree. I think he's a little bit undervalued in fantasy. There was a message that came in from Beast Move. He said, "Don't do it, Caleb." He was hoping that you wouldn't take Kyler Murray. And let me just say, the build that Beast Move has and the build that I have looks identical. He must have watched my middle round strategy video, and he must be using it to a T because it is the exact same strategy. Now, that said, I don't think we talked too much about Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers is a player that I am a little bit more down on this year. A lot of the production from Zay came when Mark Andrews was injured and not on the football field. Does that worry you for Zay Flowers, or do you still see the upside in a pick with him?
Yeah, I have Zay Flowers as my wide receiver 21. So I felt like this was a very appropriate value for where I was still very comfortable taking him. And especially on a build like this where we do have 2 flex spots. Now, if we were playing in maybe a league where you only had 1 flex spot, I probably wouldn't have gone with Zay Flowers because I didn't need to take another wide receiver. But I felt like the appropriate value, Zay Flowers, had fallen far enough. I have him ahead of Amari Cooper in my rankings. So I was very comfortable with taking him in the range where he fell.
Fair enough. I just went with my next pick there. I went Joe Burrow. I like going with the quarterback in that round. Usually I like Kyler Murray just because I have such high hopes for Kyler Murray in 2024. I think he's a top 5 quarterback. I have him as a top 5 guy in my rankings. That said, going around into the 7th round, I took DeAndre Swift, and I'm much higher on DeAndre Swift than I think the community is right now. I currently have him as my RB18 in fantasy football. I have him in the same tier as Kenneth Walker, and I have him in the same breath as guys like Alvin Kamara, who are going a little bit earlier in drafts than DeAndre Swift is. I just think when you look at how the Bears are likely going to use him, he's going to be used as a bell cow. I mean, there have been rumblings all offseason long about, is Khalil Herbert going to even make this football team? If he doesn't, that just opens up more opportunity. And not Raheem Mostert. Brett drafted Raheem Mostert. Roschon Johnson. That's who I was trying to say. Roschon Johnson has looked just like a Jag pretty much the majority of his career up to this point. I think DeAndre Swift, when he's healthy, he's going to be on the football field and he's going to be scoring points for us, because when you look at his career, when he's gotten the workload, he's been kind of a top 10 back most of those times. I mean, going back to his time in Detroit, even when he wasn't getting a massive workload, if he gets the massive workload, if he stays healthy, we could be looking at a guy who is one of the lead breakouts in 2024 and could really be one of the best values at the running back position.
Listen, I was debating him versus James Conner at my pick. So I'm right there with you with DeAndre Swift. I think last year he was a value and he started off hot and then of course didn't get the touchdown upside through like the back 8 weeks of the season that we were expecting compared to what he did through the first 8 weeks of the season. So I think adding in the fact that we're expecting the Chicago Bears offense to be better, like you said, with Caleb Williams. I know they have a ton of receivers, a ton of mouths to feed in this offense, but DeAndre Swift is a 3-down bell cow when he's used appropriately. And so I think if he can get some of those checkdowns, if he can get those receptions, as well as maybe get a little bit more touchdown upside, great value pick there for you, Andrew.
And it doesn't even account for the fact of how good this offense has looked in the preseason under Caleb Williams. I mean, if Caleb Williams is as advertised, this offense could be a top 10 offense in the NFL.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I am right now. I was hoping Javonte was going to fall to my next pick. That was going to be my ideal start, but then our Green Bay Packers fanboy over here, Zenrelli, has gone absolutely. I guess he only has 3 running backs at this point, but yeah, just gave me a little bit of a shot to the heart there. So
okay, so what are you thinking of doing now?
Well, now I have to pivot, and so we got 2 wide receivers and a Keenan Allen or Chris Godwin. You got a guy like a Jordan Love. I do feel like at this point, with how running backs are flying off the board, I'm going to get in a little bit of a predicament if I don't take a running back. So I'm looking like I do have Jaylen Warren 2 spots behind Jonathan Brooks in my ranking. So I guess I'm fine with that. I don't love this pick, Andrew. I'm honest. I don't love this pick, but I feel like if we are doing this kind of like, I don't want to say 0 RB, but I guess it's 0 RB since I waited till the 6th round to get my first running back. Like I do feel okay about the depth that I've drafted up to this point at the running back position.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I think it's fine up to that point. We kind of had a conversation about Jonathan Brooks off stream the other day. And then I don't mind Jaylen Warren either. You have the little bit of the injury that's popped up now. maybe going to jeopardize week 1, but maybe not. I guess it just depends. Now, here, I feel like this tier of wide receivers that I'm looking at is a mile long. Everybody feels pretty much similar. There is one player, there's two players that stick out. I'll talk about one of them briefly who I'm not selecting. It is Jordan Addison. Jordan Addison's dealing with an ankle injury, but I think he has a lot of upside. I'm just avoiding some of the risk that he has right now. And I am going to take a guy who also has some injury issues, probably has some risk, but I think the upside is a little bit higher than Jordan Addison. I'm going to go with Christian Watson of the Green Bay Packers. I think this offense, we talked about the Bears potentially being a top 10 offense in the NFL. The Green Bay Packers could very well be a top 10 offense in the NFL as well. And when Christian Watson has been on the football field, he has been treated as a elite deep threat. He has been treated as a first read in this offense, despite me and how much I like Jaden Reed. But Christian Watson, he should be a very good player for us in fantasy. It's just a matter of him staying on the football field too as well.
Yeah, if those doctors can figure out those hamstrings, Christian Watson, he's going to be a league winner, especially at these prices. And I think not enough people are talking about how good Jordan Love was last year, and the fact that he just passed the ball around so much that there wasn't a clear fantasy football winner out of besides the injuries that were happening on the Green Bay Packers wide receiver core, and of course he was divvying out the ball. So I'm excited to see kind of in year 2 of Jordan Love what's actually going to take place, because if anybody is going to be that prototypical alpha level size speed type wide receiver, it's going to be Christian Watson. And so I know Wicks has been getting a ton of the hype on Twitter as of recently, just because of the way that he moves in and out of his breaks. You still got Dobbs, you still have the 2 tight ends and Musgrave and Kraft. So I like Watson. I do. It'll just be interesting to see how that overall upside plays out this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's risky. I think there's guys, like I said, everybody in this tier, it all felt like it was a mile long. You had, DeAndre Hopkins dealing with an injury right now. Jordan Addison dealing with an injury. Hollywood Brown dealing with an injury right now. Christian Watson, it just feels like this whole tier is big play, high upside players that may have week 1 jeopardized as we go into the season.
Yeah. No. And where are you at? So I thought you were going to go with a guy like Keenan Allen. What made you pick Christian Watson over Keenan Allen?
I am not high on Keenan Allen this year.
Is it the muffin top?
Not the muffin top. Not really. I'd just take Devin Singletary right here. Not the muffin top, but more so I don't know how real is that, report even right now. I don't even know how real that is. It feels like it's very much blown out of proportion.
He looked slow, Andrew. He looked real slow. So it might just be it
also could be that he's 32 years old and he's had some hamstring. But no, I think the reality is he's fine. The target competition is going to be really scary for Keenan Allen. A lot of the last couple of seasons he has been a PPR target hog, and that is where a lot of his value has come from. If that doesn't happen, if you're the wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 on your own roster, because Rome Odunze has looked talented up to this point. If you are the wide receiver 3, I don't know, man. It feels very very risky in a guy like Keenan Allen, and again, I just don't think he has the upside of a guy like Christian Watson. And that sounds crazy to say right now because of what Keenan Allen has done for us in years past. But this is not the same Keenan Allen. This is not the same situation that he's been in years past.
Yeah. Which I think a lot of us like to live on the old hype. And we all know that he's kind of been inconsistent, at least on the injury front. But I think it's just the exciting thought of, oh my goodness, the defense is keen in on DJ Moore or Rome Odunze or the running game. And with Caleb Williams, what we've seen, I do think there's a lot of preseason hype that's also just building for the whole Bears offense as a whole.
Yeah, all of those guys are going to start going up draft boards. I mean, you see, we got Caleb Williams going at the 6'2" in this draft today that was ahead of Anthony Richardson. So the Caleb hype is in full effect right now. You went with Jordan Love. Talking about hype and guys who got hyped last year, you got him in the 9th round, which is significantly cheaper than the tier of players that he's kind of been bunched in with Purdy, Prescott, Burrow. Now, maybe that was just because most of the teams went with their first quarterback already and he was the odd man out and you got a good value, but that's not normal to get Jordan Love that deep. You got to be feeling good about that one.
Yeah, I mean, right now in my personal rankings, I have Jordan Love as my QB6. So I just feel like he's undervalued QB, not because I think a lot of people just don't love him. He's not flashy by any stretch of the imagination, but last year was QB5 on a points per game basis. So I'm right there with you. Jordan Love, great pick. I'm glad that I was able to get him, especially after going with 0 RB, not being able to take a guy like a Kyler Murray in the 6th. That was someone that I was very interested in, or a Joe Burrow with my Cincinnati Bengals. So I I do think getting Jordan Love here in the back end of the ninth does feel good.
Yeah, I mean, I like I said, it's not normal to get him that deep, and it's got to feel pretty good. Now you got to pick here. You've kind of went back to that running back well for a long time. Are you thinking about going back there, or you feel comfortable now kind of with the grouping that you have?
Nope, we back. I went with Trey Benson because as we talked, I don't like to draft handcuffs. I like to draft other people's handcuffs, but I think Trey Benson as just a talented running back taken in the early part of the third round. So it was like almost in the back end of the second is how I view Trey Benson's overall draft capital. I just know that at some point he will start taking over for James Conner. Can it be this year? Probably. Is it maybe going to be next year? Potentially, depending on how good James Conner does. James Conner is getting up there in age. So I just wanted a piece, whichever running back it's going to be. And so I felt very safe getting him as my RB4. I think the overall upside is there for him in this offense. Even if James Conner doesn't get injured, I think he could potentially take over for James Conner by like week 8 to week 10.
Yeah, look, I agree. I really wanted Blake Corum. Talking about handcuffs and drafting other people's handcuffs, I wanted him because I feel like there is no handcuff in fantasy football that has the upside of Blake Corum. If he is the starting running back at any point in that Rams offense, he has top 10 potential. That is just what Blake Corum is going to be able to do. Now, because of that, I'm going to have to audible, and I'm going to have to make a selection that most people are going to probably grimace when they see me make it. I'm going Ezekiel Elliott. And the reality is, Zeke, he's probably a lower ceiling, higher floor type of play in fantasy. Now, we know the situation here in Dallas. They've moved on from Tony Pollard, and they brought Ezekiel Elliott back in free agency. Here's the thing. It could very well be a guy like Rico Dowdle. Rico Dowdle could end up being the guy that you want. But Zeke profiles better as the goal line back, and we know this offense is going to be good. There's going to be a lot of touchdown opportunities. Would you be surprised, Caleb, if Ezekiel Elliott finishes the year with 9, 10, 11 touchdowns?
Yeah, so when I'm looking at my projections, I do not have him getting that many touchdowns, but it wouldn't surprise me. Now, the interesting part, and I wanted to talk to you about this because I feel like this is kind of in the same breath, is like I have Zeke and Trey Benson ahead of Zamir White, and we see how much earlier Zamir White went in this draft. So, like, where are you valuing Zamir White? Am I just too low on Zamir White? Because I feel like the 7-10, it feels early. It feels way too early for me to feel comfortable with it.
It sounds quite low. I have Zamir as my RB24, I think. Let me pull that actually back up. I have him as my 24. I have Zeke as RB. Where's Zeke? 38.
Oh, I have Zeke as my RB29. I have Zamir as my RB31.
So we kind of have them swapped. But I don't think, look, I don't like Zamir White that much this year either. I think that might be a little too far. He is going to get a massive workload. He is going to see the bulk of the touchdown opportunities there. Is he going to be great? Is he going to finish the year as a starter even? I think that's a question. But I don't know, man. I don't think there's a lot to love about Zamir White. Now I got to lock in. I got to figure out what I want to do here.
Yeah, we like how your team's been built so far. I feel like you've had the upside on the wide receiver front, but you only have 4. So wide receiver is definitely an option.
Yeah, I wanted Curtis Samuel or Khalil Shakir. They didn't come back around. Don't really want to grab Romeo Dobbs. Well, he's not even available, so it doesn't matter. Look, I'm struggling. I kind of want to go with the wide receiver. I guess I'm going to swing for the fence here and try and see if I can get a breakout. I'm going to grab a rookie, Adonai Mitchell. I really liked him in the pre-draft process. I think he is going to be a very good complement to Michael Pittman Jr. And if this offense does take a step forward with Anthony Richardson under center, Shane Steichen calling the plays, Shane Steichen has typically had one of the higher or one of the faster paced offenses in the NFL. If they're throwing the football a lot, they're moving quickly, and Adonai Mitchell is on the receiving end of a couple big play touchdowns and things like that throughout the year, I think we could be looking at a guy who really does perform for fantasy football. And heaven forbid, there ever be an injury to Michael Pittman Jr., he could have true alpha wide receiver 1 type of upside.
I'm 100% there with you. And I think if AD Mitchell can just be kind of what Josh Downs was last year, that's a great value that you got at that pick. But if he can be even more than that, which I think a lot of us do think he has that potential just because of not only the draft capital, not only the build, but also the Josh Downs injury, I think the value that you got at this pick, shooting for the moon. And I like what you did with AD Mitchell and Christian Watson. You're kind of taking these late round dart throws. Like, of course, like we'd love some maybe good, stable production across the board, but having 2 guys that if they hit their absolute ceiling, they're going to just boost your overall team and your league winning value, especially when you got a guy like Jamar Chase in the first round. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, right? Like with a build like this where I am going with the hero running back, the the benefit of doing that is that you get to land an elite tight end, you get to land an elite wide receiver, and you get you get to land an elite tight end, you get to land an elite quarterback, and you get to build a very strong wide receiver room. I mean, Chase, Collins, Pickens, in a 2 wide receiver league where you're starting 2 of them every week, yes, you have the 2 flexes as well. It does feel very much like you have enough firepower in the wide receiver room that you should start taking some shots on the high upside guys, because at the end of the day, yes, you are drafting your fantasy football team at your draft. Obviously, you are not drafting your Week 17 roster, though. You're going to have waiver wires. You're going to have trades throughout the year that you can make to increase and improve this roster. Finding players that can outperform the ADP and increase in value throughout the year, that is going to make the difference between wins and losses come playoff time. And I think that's what Adonai Mitchell and Christian Watson do. Is there a chance that they don't live up to the expectation? Sure. Can you replace them on the waiver wire? Probably. That's just the reality at the wide receiver position.
So while you make this pick, we had a little bit of a backup quarterback run go with Tua, Daniels, Trevor Lawrence, Goff, Herbert, all off the board. And I've been kind of saying all offseason that the quarterback depth this year just feels insane. Like, of course, there's the top level guys that we want because they're a points per game difference. But I mean, we're sitting here and we still have 3 rounds to go. And we still got like Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers, Matty Boy Stafford, Baker, Deshaun, Will Levis, like all still on the board. So I don't know if you're in the same mindset, but I am, especially in a format like this, like 1 quarterback is all I'm taking in the draft. I would much prefer to take those upside shots on the running backs, the handcuffs, even late round wide receivers, because if they hit, and then I can kind of just address the quarterback by the waiver wire. What are your thoughts?
No, I agree. I think there's a tier, eventually when you might need to consider taking 2 quarterbacks, and that might be, if we've waited up to this point and you're looking at the quarterbacks that are on the board currently. Let me just name some of those guys so people know. You have like Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford. Like if these are the guys that you're maybe thinking of rolling out as QB1, maybe you take 2 of them at that point. But I think you're right. Like part of why I keep going back to the strategy of the hero running back, the reason why I like it so much is you do get the elite quarterback and the elite tight end. And by doing that, I do say you only like to draft one of them because you have the elite guy, and it opens up the roster construction down the back end of the roster to where you can focus on the running backs and the wide receivers and finding those breakouts there. So I totally agree with you.
So you're back on the clock, and we've seen a bunch of people already start to address their kicker and their defense.
Mm-hmm.
I am just a heavy, like last 2 rounds. That's all I'm doing. Defense, kicker. I typically do a defense first because I feel like it's easier to get a better defense, and then kickers is kind of just random on overall production. So yeah, I don't know the people that are taking with 2 rounds to go a kicker. I could not be you, but respect if that's the way that you want to try to get the best elite kicker out there.
I am very much, the guy that my defense and my kicker are the very last 2 picks in my draft. These are not necessarily pieces of my roster that I expect to finish the year on. I do like to stream the position sometimes. So, if I get a defense that has a good opening schedule and I can play them for 2 or 3 weeks and then I can drop them and move on to the next defense, by all means, that's all I'm doing. Same with the kicker. I'm streaming matchups. I'm trying to find a little tip for people. I like to look at Vegas's over-unders on the game totals. Find kickers in those high-scoring games where you think you're going to get a couple extra field goals, a couple extra points. I like to do that when I'm streaming. But at the end of the day, yeah, I'm waiting until late in the draft, the last 2 picks, and that's where I'm going with my defense and my kicker. Now, I did finish this draft off with 2 running backs, I guess for my skill positions, because I do need to draft my defense and kicker now. But that being said, with the hero running back, I end up coming away with a running back room of Devon Achane, DeAndre Swift, Devin Singletary, Ezekiel Elliott, Jaleel McLaughlin, and J.K. Dobbins. And I feel like it gives me a nice little mix of floor and ceiling. I like McLaughlin a lot in this offense. I think if Javonte isn't as advertised, if he isn't healthy, McLaughlin has some really good upside in this offense, where Sean Payton, he targeted the running back position more than any coach in the NFL last year. And we're talking about half PPR. If you're getting those extra half point per reception to the running back position, a guy like McLaughlin, if he's catching a lot of footballs, he can be very solid. And then J.K. Dobbins, he's an interesting case. I really haven't drafted a lot of him, but he did fall to a decent spot here. I was debating between him and Antonio Gibson, and I just believe that Chargers offense is going to be a better offense than that New England offense is this year. I think J.K. Dobbins, he's in a competition with Gus Edwards-Helaire, and I do expect Gus to get the first crack at the starting job, I think week 1. But J.K. Dobbins, man, it feels very much like whoever it is in this backfield is going to see a massive workload and is going to see a massive opportunity share, because we know that Jim Harbaugh wants to establish the run. Greg Roman wants to establish the run, and he brought over J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards in this offense. So even though, he may not be the guy, to me, I think he has as good of a chance as Gus Edwards. And look, Gus Edwards went in the 9th round. J.K. went in the 13th. So I'll take the same bet as the Gus Edwards bet, just a few rounds later.
Especially with the fact that J.K. Dobbins, we all know his injury woes and concerns, similar to Gus Edwards. Gus Edwards hasn't been able to stay healthy in his NFL career. I know he tore, in that very terrible year where he tore his ACL, when everyone on the Ravens was tearing their ACLs on the practice field, which was terrible. But I love the later round shot that you get there. And especially I know the Kamani Vidal stands are going to say that there's a chance for him, but I saw a report, I think it was late last week, that there's a chance that Kamani doesn't even make the roster, which it's hard for me to believe that that's actually going to happen. But I think that furthermore shows that J.K. Dobbins kind of has himself cemented right there as the RB2.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what they brought him in to be. And at the end of the day, like I said, I was debating between him and Antonio Gibson. Another guy that I was looking at that I think we should probably bring up is Marshawn Lloyd. He was who I was looking at as well. I think Lloyd has some high upside. The problem is the entire offseason up to this point, it feels like it's been injury after injury after injury. Are you as high on Marshawn as a talent as I am? And then are you worried about maybe just having a slow rookie season with Josh Jacobs there, probably getting a majority of the workload, and Lloyd dealing with a lot of the injury?
Yeah, I don't think I'm as high as you on Marshawn Lloyd. I mean, I right now have him
as my running back 4 in the class. I had him as my running back 4.
So for dynasty purposes, yes, I do like Lloyd. I think especially with AJ Dillon aging out. But when we're talking redraft, I right now have him as my RB 58. So it's hard for me to. That's a late round shot. I prefer. There's a lot of guys that I kind of prefer over him. Clearly, but I do see the value. If something were to happen, we have seen in the Green Bay Packers before, they like to use RB by committee, and then you have the opportunity to see Marshawn Lloyd. If something were to happen to Josh Jacobs, something were to happen to AJ Dillon, I do think Marshawn Lloyd, of course, could be super valuable. So you're just getting, if something were to happen in the first few weeks, bump if something were to happen if you drafted Marshawn Lloyd.
So I want to talk a little bit. You drafted Jalen Wright and Gabe Davis. Let's talk about those two guys. What do you like about them as your selections there?
Yeah, so Jalen Wright, I think we talked about it with Devon earlier, worried about this 3-headed backfield. And I don't think Jalen Wright has a ton of value unless something happens to Raheem Mostert or Devon. And the thing that we've seen with both of them as running backs is that they both haven't been able to stay healthy through their career. Not that it's ever been super serious, but just nicks and knacks. And that's enough for a guy like Jalen Wright to slide into that RB2 role, which we saw last year can be super beneficial. Even if you're only getting 40 to 45% of the snaps in a given week, that could absolutely blow up for Jalen Wright. So I did like the selection there as a late round pick. And then Gabe Davis got the massive contract for the Jacksonville Jaguars. All the hypes on Brian Thomas, all the hypes on Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, but big play Gabe. All I need is 1 week from him, and I think it could give me 1 week, especially at these prices.
Yeah, I agree. I think he was brought in there to be not necessarily the wide receiver 2 in the pecking order, but the second outside wide receiver. We know that Christian Kirk is likely going to play in the slot. I think Brian Thomas, we all expect him to develop and turn into this alpha number 1 wide receiver for Trevor Lawrence. But I think Gabe Davis, like you said, big play Gabe, he's going to be very good. He's going to give you those spike weeks. And I think Jalen Wright, look, I said on my running backs video the other day, if you don't want to take the Devon Achane pick and you don't want to take the Raheem Mostert pick, Jalen Wright is the same bet. He might have to, see an injury or two ahead of him. The guys in front of him haven't necessarily been the most healthy either up to this point in their careers. He's the same bet, just at a much, much cheaper price in drafts.
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about my team, Andrew. I ain't gonna lie. But there you go, taking Jake Moody, freaking Michigan kicker. Man,
they're gonna score a lot of points, right? The Niners are gonna score a lot of points, so there should be a lot of field goal opportunities. Like I said, I'm not really waiting, all year long with Jake Moody, but yeah, get me off to a nice start, Jake.
Well, I'm praying that my guy falls here. We got a lot of kickers about to come flying off. Let me pull up my kicker rankings just to see how I'm viewing this. I don't trust sleepers. We got freaking Cammy. That was a potential thought, but I'll go with my boy Daniel Carlson for Las Vegas. I think they're going to be a good enough offense that they will get close enough. I just don't think they're going to be a good enough offense to constantly punch the ball in. So I think the upside with Daniel Carlson is good. And I know you talked about Jake Moody for scoring purposes. I think the way that I look at kickers, and this could definitely be wrong because I'm not a kicker whisperer in fantasy football by any stretch of the imagination, but I feel like I would rather have a guy that's going to get 4 field goal opportunities than a guy that's going to have 5, touchdown. They only get the extra point opportunities, depending on what your kicker format is scoring wise. So
yeah.
I don't know.
Fair enough. I think there's probably no correct way to look at kickers. I mean, we are talking about kickers, which, in all fairness, guys, this is a controversial statement. I think we should be playing fantasy football without defenses and kickers, but I know a lot of people play with defenses and kickers, so that's why we do that in the content. I don't play in any of my leagues with defenses and kickers. Now, that said, I like to target, just offense. I think that can score a lot, because at the end of the day, the Niners, they may have, 5, 6, 7 opportunities where they're in the red zone, or maybe they're even in the, within the 40s. And I think that being said, there's a lot of opportunities for Moody to get an opportunity. I don't know. Again, like I said, I'm not a kicker whisperer. You said you're not either. We don't, as far as the kickers, who cares? That's my opinion on the kickers.
That's why we took him in the last round. That's why we didn't reach. Yeah. We didn't take anybody. When did the earliest kicker go? Was it round
Tucker?
What, Tucker?
13.
13, yeah.
Oh, wait, no. Brandon Aubrey was the first one, 13-4.
Yeah. We don't do that. Don't do that, guys. Don't take a kicker that early.
Wait a little bit. But let's do this. I want to look at your team. You got your team right here. Talk me through the draft. And as you mentioned, you wanted to practice, for your draft that was coming up. That's the point of these mock drafts. Get the practice in, get the reps in. But I think as much as we practice, we should also reflect. So look at the roster for me. Tell me what you like about it, what you dislike about it, and what would you take away from this practice into your actual home league draft?
Yeah, my first 4 picks went absolutely exceptional. Jefferson, Puka, Travis Kelce, Stefon Diggs. I felt like I got 4 guys in probably my top 32 rankings. So I absolutely love it. The thing is that then we're looking, you're like, okay, well, you didn't get a running back, Caleb. And I agree. And so knowing that like that Zay Flowers pick, I wish I could have gotten a better running back there, but there wasn't anybody. Like, I'm not a big Aaron Jones guy, so it felt like there wasn't enough value for me to kind of reach on somebody. So that's when I went with Zay Flowers, and especially in this like 2 wide receiver, 2 flex format, I felt like it was a good enough value. Now the running backs, we did kind of then do that 0 RB build. James Conner, Jonathan Brooks, Jalen Warren. I think Brooks has a ton of upside. Depends on when he comes back in that Dave Canales-led offense. James Conner, high touchdown upside. Warren, injured, but could he be Arthur Smith's Cordell Patterson? I guess we're banking and hoping that that's the case. Jordan Love was great value. Then, of course, Trey Benson got a bunch more flyers with Jacoby Myers, Jalen Wright, Gabe Davis. So I like the depth. I think the overall running back upside is going to be the make or break of this team. And so based on that, I would give this team a B+ rating.
Fair enough. I will ask you this question too, because I would kind of be interested in your strategy. So when you come away from your draft with a team like this, let's say this is your build going into week 1, are you going to be extra aggressive on the waiver wire when, those running backs start to pop up? Because every year you get those running backs that the waivers, that's where we want to go. We've had Elijah Mitchell's in years past, James Robinson's. Last year was Kyron Williams, on the waiver wire. Do you get really aggressive with that? You burn your number 1 waiver priority on the first running back you see. You burn your fab on the first running back you see. Is that what you do?
I think on this team specifically, that's like the only weakness I feel is on that running back. So if somebody like a Kyron will to emerge, or like Devon, I know Devon was on a ton of waivers last year. Like, yeah, that's exactly who I'm going to be trying to pull in onto this roster, because I do think James Conner, Brooks, Warren, like it's stable enough, but I think having the ability to get one of the high-end guys that could potentially be, it doesn't even have to be an RB1 on a point per game basis, just like a high-end RB2 is kind of all this team is going to need to go week to week.
Yeah, like I even think like last year, not so sexy options that you could have got off the waiver wire. Gus Edwards was coming off the waiver wire and he gave you a decent year. Jerome Ford came off the waiver wire and he gave people a decent year down the back half. Not game breakers, but still guys that you could plug in as the RB2 on your lineup and be okay because they gave you 10 points.
Yeah, I think especially with this roster, probably Gabe Davis is probably going to be cut ship pretty fast for a running back option, and depending on how Trey Benson and Jalen Wright do, those would probably be the first guys that end up hitting the waivers to go get another running back.
I would assume too, just because of your depth at the wide receiver, even Jacoby would fit that kind of bill too. Like if there was 2 guys that popped up, you're probably trying to get both of them, and those are your 2 drop candidates.
Exactly, 100%.
Fair enough. All right, well, let's look at my roster. I did end up going with that hero running back build where we went with an elite game-breaking running back early, and then we just tried to get elite at all of the other positions while punting the RB2 deep into the draft. Looking at the team, I came away with Jamar Chase in the first round, filled that wide receiver room out with Chase, Nico Collins, George Pickens, Christian Watson, and Adonai Mitchell. So only 5 wide receivers. I think you came away with 6. That's all right. My plan was to really just hammer home a lot of running back 2s to try and find my running back 2 and 3 as depth. Now, I did pull away with Achane, DeAndre Swift, Devin Singletary, Ezekiel Elliott, Jaleel McLaughlin, and J.K. Dobbins. So kind of similar. if there's a wide receiver that comes out that looks really good week 1, maybe a Puka, from last year or something like that. J.K. Dobbins, McLaughlin, these guys are cut candidates for me. I really want to see what McLaughlin does week 1. I want to see what his usage looks like. I want to see what Dobbins looks like. But those guys are cut candidates. But I also am trying to use them as that running back 2 and 3, trying to fill out where that's going to be. I was able to get an elite tight end, an elite quarterback. We come away with Kincaid and Burrow. Burrow with the stack for Jamar Chase. So I did get the stack there, which is kind of nice. Not necessarily something I targeted, but it's a bonus on top of it for me. How do you feel about stacks? Are they something you target, or are they bonuses as well? Do you enjoy stacks? I know some people feel like stacks is controversial sometimes.
Yeah, I think for me, I like elite stacks. So like I would put Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase as like an elite stack. I would put like Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb as an elite stack. I would have Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce as an elite stack. I think once we kind of get out of that range, I mean, maybe you could convince me on, depends on how Marvin Harrison Jr. does this year, but like a Kyler Marv stack. Outside of all of that, I don't know. There's not really any that like, Josh Allen, Dalton Kincaid, like, I don't know if that excites me. If you're able to get that done, congrats. But I think stacking as a whole, like I don't think there's a ton of upside unless we're talking like in this circumstance. And then Jamar Chase has a Randy Moss type year, and Tom Brady / Joe Burrow is who we think he can be, and rebounds after last year. So I like it for you. I do think, especially with your team, getting Joe Burrow where you got him kind of pissed me off because I thought it was really great late round value. I thought potentially it was going to force a lot of these other quarterbacks to fall with Joe Burrow sitting there, and that did not happen. And then I freaking mentioned DeAndre Swift as someone that I was considering with James Conner, and I should have just kept my big fat mouth shut. And then you ended up taking him before he fell back to me, and I was just like, goodness gracious. So
yeah,
I did like that.
I was looking at that round. Is my favorite round. Round 7 specifically is my favorite round to try and target some of these running backs because there's some good value there. You have guys that I have highlighted. You even took some of them. But Najee Harris, DeAndre Swift, Raheem Mostert, Jalen Warren, Jonathan Brooks, Tony Pollard. Like, these are the guys that I think in that 7th and 8th round, like if you're looking and they're available, I kind of like taking the shot on them. So Swift is my favorite of the bunch. I think Najee would be my second favorite of the bunch. But after that, pick your poison. I guess not really pick your poison, pick your flavor. Somebody got mad at me for saying pick your poison in a video. They said, do you even know what that means? I'm like, look, man, I talk about fantasy football. I'm not an English major. It is what it is. Leave me alone. But that being said, man, last thing, as I mentioned, I got the elite tight end and elite QB, so I didn't take any backups. And that's the strategy that I would suggest people do if you get the elite options. It sounds like you kind of feel the same. So that being said, man, I do appreciate you joining me today. If you guys want to watch some of Caleb's content, I strongly suggest you do. Just like us, he is putting out content all of the time, 24/7, 365 throughout the rest of the fantasy football season, trying to help you guys win your fantasy football championships. I will link all of his information in the description for you to go find it out. But Caleb, go ahead and shout yourself out too so they know where to find you at.
Yeah, you guys can find me over on Caleb Niemi at YouTube. Also find me on Twitter, same name. We post mostly focus on YouTube, trying to provide the best video content, just like Andrew over here at the League FFB. There will 100% be some start-sit streams this year with me and Andrew, so you guys will see a lot more of me as we get on to the season, and I'm excited to help you win some fantasy football championships.
Yeah, man, the season's right here. It is right here. I'm excited. Hopefully a good season for both of us. We can come away with some championships, teams with not a lot of injuries. Hopefully there's just not a lot of injuries in the NFL. It's more fun when these guys are healthy. But hey, if you guys are watching right now, you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button. We have a goal of 3,000 subscribers by week 1. I think we can make it happen if you guys just go attack that subscribe button. So if it's not checked off yet, go do that for us. Hit the like button, join the Discord, do all that good stuff. Caleb, you got anything for the people before we get out of here?
Yeah, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Boy's trying to get to 3,000. I'm here with him. We're on the grind. So support the good work that Andrew's doing. Probably the best choice you'll make all year on all your YouTube content. So appreciate being here with you, Andrew. Always a pleasure.
I appreciate it, man. All right, guys, we'll see you on the next episode. Till then, peace out.